Pre-Socratic philosophy, 6th to 5th century BCE. Before Socrates ever asked about virtue or justice, a daring group of thinkers in ancient Greece posed what might be the most fundamental human question. What is the world actually made of? Imagine living 2,600 years ago, when most people believed storms were Zeus's anger or earthquakes were Poseidon's rage. Then, a handful of minds decided, no, there must be natural causes. Let's reason it out. That moment is the birth of philosophy and science together. The very first name we have is Thales of Miletus. Around 600 BCE, he boldly claimed that everything was made of water. Sounds naive to us, but at the time, it was revolutionary. He gave the cosmos a physical explanation, not a divine one. Then came Heraclitus, who argued the opposite. Not water, but fire, because to him, the world was constant change and conflict. He summed it up, you can't step into the same river twice. Compare that with Parmenides, who insisted the reverse. That change was an illusion and reality is one timeless, unshakable unity. These men weren't just disagreeing. They were inventing the very idea of logical debate about existence itself. Others expanded the puzzle. Anaximander spoke of an infinite boundless source beyond any element. Democritus introduced atoms, tiny indivisible building blocks, which astonishingly anticipates modern science by over 2,000 years. Today, when we split atoms in nuclear research or map molecular biology, we're still playing inside an intellectual arena these early Greeks first imagined. What's remarkable is how small this world really was. Many of these men lived in coastal cities of Ionia, trade hubs with populations of maybe 40,000 people. Yet the shift they sparked from mythos, knowledge through story, to logos, knowledge through reason, reshaped civilization. Without it, there's no Plato or Aristotle, no Copernicus, no Einstein. The Pre-Socratics gave us the courage to believe the universe obeyed patterns that human minds could understand. That single leap, choosing explanation over legend, is why we can speak of philosophy or science or rational inquiry at all. In other words, they didn't just ask what the world was, they proved we could ask why in the first place. Classical Greek philosophy, 5th to 4th century BCE. If the Pre-Socratics cracked open the question, what is the world made of? The classical Greeks asked an even bigger one. How should we live in it? This era gave us philosophy's most iconic trio, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the backbone of Western thought. Let's start with Socrates. He left behind no books, only conversations that his students wrote down. But his impact came from his method, relentless questioning. He'd stop Athenians in the street, asking, what is justice? What is courage? Are you sure you know? That uncomfortable push toward clarity, what we now call the Socratic method, forms the very heart of critical thinking. And when Athens condemned him for corrupting the youth, he chose death by drinking hemlock rather than betray his principles. Imagine that, a philosopher executed for asking too many good questions. His student Plato took those ideas and built an entire system: metaphysics, ethics, politics. He founded the Academy, one of the first universities. And he gave us enduring images, the allegory of the cave, where most of us are chained, mistaking shadows for reality, until philosophy frees us to see the truth. For Plato, the highest goal wasn't just knowledge. It was aligning with the eternal forms, with justice, beauty, and the good itself. Then comes Plato's student, Aristotle. Where Plato loved ideals, Aristotle loved observation. He studied biology, logic, politics, anything he could classify. His writings fill over 2,000 pages, covering everything from astronomy to ethics. He even tutored a young Alexander the Great, so his influence literally spread across empires. His guiding question was practical. How do we achieve eudaimonia, the flourishing life? For him, ethics wasn't about abstract perfection, but cultivating virtue in daily action. What makes this classical era so powerful is that these thinkers didn't agree, they debated. Plato's eternal truths versus Aristotle's empirical facts, Socrates' open-ended questions versus the state's demand for conformity. Their friction forged the core issues we still argue today. What is justice? What's real, ideas or matter? What makes a life worth living? And the outcomes? Lasting institutions, rigorous methods, and timeless frameworks. Courts still use Socratic questioning. Universities trace themselves back to Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum. Every debate about democracy, morality, or science, they already asked it 2,400 years ago. The classical Greeks didn't just philosophize. They built the vocabulary of human thought. That's why you'll still hear echoes of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle in classrooms, in politics, even in arguments with friends. When we try to live the good life, we are still walking the roads they paved. Hellenistic philosophy, 3rd to 1st century BCE. When Alexander the Great's empire stretched from Greece all the way to India, the old certainties of city-state life collapsed. People weren't just asking about politics or grand ideals anymore. They were asking something much more personal. How do I find peace in a massive, unstable world I can't control? That's the heart of Hellenistic philosophy. 3 schools stood out. Epicurus, founder of Epicureanism, argued that true happiness wasn't about luxury or excess, but freedom from fear and pain. He famously said, "If you wish to make a man wealthy, don't give him more money, reduce his desires." Epicureans lived modestly with friends, seeking simple pleasures and tranquility of mind. On the other side stood Zeno of Citium, who created Stoicism. For Stoics, happiness comes from living in harmony with reason and nature, not chasing what you can't control. External events, loss, disaster, even death, are beyond you. What matters is your response, your virtue, your discipline. That's why Stoicism remains so popular today, even fueling modern bestsellers, from corporate CEOs quoting Marcus Aurelius to athletes using Stoic resilience as mental armor. Then there were the skeptics, like Pyrrho, who argued we can't ever fully know what's true. His solution? Suspend judgment. Stop clinging to rigid beliefs, and you'll find inner calm. In a chaotic world of competing dogmas, skepticism became a path to mental relief. What makes this era remarkable is how practical it became. Philosophy wasn't just abstract speculation. It was self-help, therapy, a guide for survival. Imagine sitting in Athens around 250 BCE, hearing Epicurus tell you the gods don't control your fate, or watching a Stoic endure trial without despair. These weren't armchair thinkers. They were lifestyle coaches of the ancient world. And the legacy? Immense. Epicurean ideas shaped later science and secularism. Stoicism influenced Roman leaders, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, and continues to inspire millions in the 21st century. Skepticism laid groundwork for modern scientific humility. Admit uncertainty, test, verify. The Hellenistic era proved that when the world feels unstable, philosophy turns inward into the art of living. Whether you lean Epicurean, Stoic, or skeptic, the message is timeless. Peace isn't found by fixing the world. It's found by mastering yourself within it. Medieval philosophy, 5th to 14th century CE. When the Roman Empire fell, philosophy didn't disappear. It was reborn inside monasteries, mosques, and libraries. For nearly 1,000 years, the great debate wasn't what is the universe made of, but something sharper. How do we reconcile human reason with divine faith? Take Augustine of Hippo, a bishop in North Africa around the 4th century. He wrestled with guilt, temptation, and human weakness, eventually arguing that true wisdom comes from God. His Confessions is part autobiography, part philosophy, part prayer, and it shaped Christian thought for centuries. Augustine's bold claim? Without divine grace, humans can't reach true goodness on their own. Centuries later, the torch passed to Islamic scholars like Avicenna in Persia. A genius who wrote hundreds of books, he blended Aristotle with medicine and theology. His Canon of Medicine was a standard European text for 500 years. Then came Averroes in Spain, who insisted that philosophy and religion don't contradict. They complement each other. For him, truth discovered by reason and truth revealed by Scripture are just two paths to the same God. This intellectual bridge crossed cultures. Christian thinkers studying Muslim translations of Aristotle, Jewish scholars engaging both traditions. Knowledge wasn't locked in one world. It traveled across faith lines, sparking new synthesis. The culmination arrives with Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. His masterpiece, the Summa Theologica, tried to harmonize Aristotle's logic with Christian doctrine point by point. Aquinas laid out 5 proofs that God exists, arguments still debated today. His method? Precise questions, objections, counterarguments, and answers. Systematic, rigorous, almost like medieval debate club on steroids. So what's the outcome? The medieval era forged the very framework of Western universities. Disputation, commentary, logic applied to faith. The battle between reason and belief turned into a dialogue that still underpins legal theory, theology, even science. And the long-term impact? Massive. Augustine's views shaped sin and salvation. Avicenna influenced both medicine and metaphysics. Averroes defended rationalism. Aquinas became the cornerstone of Catholic philosophy. Together, they proved that philosophy could survive inside religion. and sometimes even thrive because of it. Medieval philosophy isn't dusty theology. It's the drama of reason and faith wrestling for the human soul. And that drama still lingers every time we ask, can science and belief coexist, or are they destined to clash? Renaissance humanism, 14th to 16th century CE. After centuries where philosophy was tied tightly to theology, something dramatic happened in Europe. The spotlight shifted from God back to man. This era, the Renaissance, literally means rebirth. And what was being reborn? The wisdom of the ancient Greeks and Romans, rediscovered in dusty texts and applied to a fresh vision of human life. Humanism became the movement of the age. Its central idea? Humans aren't just sinful souls in need of redemption. We're capable, creative beings with enormous potential. Education, art, literature, politics, all became tools not just for piety, but for cultivating individuality and greatness. Look at Desiderius Erasmus, often called the Prince of Humanists. He believed knowledge and learning could reform religion itself. His sharp wit and scholarship made him one of the most influential figures in Europe, translating the New Testament and reminding the Church that at its heart, Christianity should be about compassion, not corruption. But humanism wasn't just scholarly, it was also political. Enter Niccolò Machiavelli. In his infamous book The Prince, he asked the rawest political question of all, is it better to be loved or feared? His answer, ideally both, but if you have to choose, be feared. Machiavelli stripped politics of moral illusions and showed power for what it really is, calculated, strategic, often ruthless. He became so notorious that Machiavellian is still shorthand for cunning manipulation. On a more personal level, we get thinkers like Michel de Montaigne, who invented the modern essay. Instead of abstract systems, he turned inward, exploring his own thoughts, fears, and contradictions with brutal honesty. By admitting his flaws, Montaigne made philosophy intimate and human in a way nobody had before. The outcome of Renaissance humanism? A culture obsessed with human capacity. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci weren't just painters, they were scientists, inventors, anatomists. The figure of the Renaissance man was born, the idea that one individual could master many disciplines, reflecting the boundless potential of human beings. And a long-term impact? Humanism planted the seeds of the Enlightenment, modern science, and democracy. By shifting attention back to people, not just the divine, it made individual dignity, creativity, and critical thinking the engines of modern civilization. In short, medieval philosophy asked, how do we reconcile God and reason? Renaissance humanism asked something far bolder. What can human beings achieve if we dare to believe in ourselves? Early modern philosophy, 17th to 18th century. The Renaissance rediscovered human potential, but the early modern era pushed philosophy into brand new terrain, the nature of knowledge itself. Why? Because around this time, 1600s into the 1700s, the scientific revolution exploded. Telescopes, microscopes, and calculus were appending everything we thought we knew. Philosophers suddenly had to answer, how do we know what's true? The fight quickly divided into two camps. On one side were the rationalists, convinced that reason and logic alone could uncover universal truths. Leading the charge was René Descartes. Famous for I think, therefore I am, Descartes tried to doubt everything, until he found one thing he couldn't, his own existence as a thinking being. He dreamed of building knowledge like a geometric proof, clear and unquestionable. Standing with him was Baruch Spinoza, who saw God and nature as one infinite, orderly system, completely rational. Then Leibniz argued we live in the best of all possible worlds, a place designed through perfect logical balance. Rationalists believed the mind itself carried eternal truths, like math, already within us. Their opponents were the empiricists. For them, knowledge comes not from pure reason, but from lived experience. John Locke compared the mind to a blank slate, written on by the senses. David Hume took it further. He shook the foundations of certainty, showing that we never see cause and effect. We just form habits of expectation. For Hume, even science is ultimately built on assumptions. That's philosophy throwing a knockout punch. So you've got rationalists saying truth is in the mind, empiricists fighting back. Truth is an experience. Reason versus experience, like the intellectual main event of the early modern age. The outcomes? This battle shaped the roots of modern science, psychology, and politics. Empiricism laid the groundwork for evidence-based science. Rationalism inspired mathematics and the idea of universal principles in law and ethics. and the tension between them eventually sparked Immanuel Kant in the late 18th century, who declared, "Both sides are partly right." But without early modern philosophy's fierce sparring, there's no enlightenment, no modern worldview. In this era, philosophy essentially became science's sparring partner, testing its logic, probing its assumptions, and making sure that human reason, dazzling as it was, never went unchallenged. Enlightenment philosophy, 18th century. By the 1700s, philosophy wasn't staying in dusty libraries. It was exploding into the streets, into politics, into revolutions. This period, the Enlightenment, has been called the Age of Reason. Its thinkers believed humanity could finally free itself from superstition, tyranny, and ignorance by using knowledge, debate, and universal principles. Take Voltaire, a master of wit who attacked intolerance and fanaticism with devastating satire. His message was simple yet dangerous. No institution, not even the church, is above criticism. Denis Diderot, meanwhile, launched the Encyclopedia, a massive project to gather and spread all human knowledge. Imagine the first Wikipedia of its time, so threatening to kings and clergy that it was censored, banned, even burned. Then there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who electrified politics with a radical idea that legitimate government depends on the general will, the people. His social contract opened the door to modern democracy, inspiring both the French Revolution and thinkers across the Atlantic. And in America, Thomas Jefferson and other revolutionaries absorbed these Enlightenment ideals, rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. An actual government was founded on philosophical principles, something unprecedented in history. But the high priest of the Enlightenment was Immanuel Kant. In his critique of pure reason and essays on morality, he argued that true freedom comes from autonomy, the ability to act according to moral law we give ourselves. In short, you're not free when you do whatever you want. You're free when you choose to live by reason and duty. His motto for the Enlightenment summed it all up: dare to know. The outcomes were earth-shattering. Political revolutions in America and France. Constitutions based on human rights, not divine right. A belief in progress, that reason and science could steadily improve human life. But the drama runs deeper. The Enlightenment birthed liberty, but it also opened questions we still wrestle with. Whose liberty? Whose rights? Can human reason alone create justice? Or does it always produce new power struggles? Still, this era proved one thing. Philosophy could set the world on fire. The Enlightenment wasn't just ideas and books, it was ideas turning into nations. 19th to 20th century philosophy, modern and contemporary. By the 1800s, philosophy faced a whole new reality. Industrial revolutions, social upheaval, scientific advances, Darwin, steam engines, railroads, urban alienation. Old certainties, God, monarchy, tradition, were crumbling. Philosophy responded not with quiet theory, but with some of the boldest, most unsettling ideas in history. Start with George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He imagined history itself as a process, human freedom unfolding through conflict, each stage giving rise to a higher truth. His vision inspired countless movements, including Karl Marx. Marx flipped Hegel on his head, arguing that material conditions, labor, class struggle, drive history. His critique of capitalism wasn't abstract. It was a burning prophecy of alienation, exploitation, and revolution. You can still feel its weight in every debate about inequality today. Then comes Friedrich Nietzsche, delivering some of the most explosive lines ever written. God is dead. What he meant was that traditional religion no longer answered modern humanity's hunger for meaning. But if God is gone, then values must be created by us, boldly, dangerously. He challenged us to become overmen, creators of new purpose in a disenchanted world. Existential dread? Nietzsche practically trademarked it. Meanwhile, Soren Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, focused on the individual's leap of faith. For him, meaning couldn't be handed down by institutions. It was a personal choice often made in anguish. Later, philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre took that message further. Man is condemned to be free. There's no blueprint for life. You choose, and with that freedom comes crushing responsibility. And Simone de Beauvoir expanded existentialism to gender, arguing in her groundbreaking work that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. With that, philosophy fueled modern feminism. But philosophy also turned inward to the very structure of language itself. Ludwig Wittgenstein declared that many philosophical problems are nothing but knots in our language. Untangling them, he thought, might dissolve centuries of confusion. The result? A century of intellectual rebellion. Philosophy no longer felt like distant speculation. It became a mirror of modern anxiety, alienation, freedom, absurdity. It challenged politics, religion, identity, and even the way we use words. And the long-term impact? Enormous. Marxism shaped revolutions and global politics. Nietzsche's call for self-created values forged modern debates about meaning. Existentialism still speaks to anyone who's asked at 3 a.m. What's the point of it all? Simone de Beauvoir opened the door to feminist philosophy, and Wittgenstein reshaped the way we think about truth itself. Where earlier eras sought certainty, the 19th and 20th centuries embraced uncertainty. Philosophy became raw, personal, and often unsettling. And maybe that's the real lesson. That in the modern world, philosophy doesn't hand us answers. It hands us tools to confront the chaos and the courage to invent meaning for ourselves.